I'm delighted to have someone with profound insights into spirituality and meditation.
Thank you, Dennis. A pleasure to be with you.
John, what initially drew you to the path of spirituality and meditation?
I didn't know even what spirit was, or the word wasn't in my head as a child. But I was very fortunate. I was born in the deep country. I'm a countryman through and through. I was born before the war, which will show you how old I am. In the days when there were more horses on the farms than tractors. And I lived in quite an isolated little house in the deep country. I hardly knew what another little boy was, really, in my childhood. I played alone in the fields with animals, sheep and cows and horses, of course, and these were what I was familiar with up to the age of 7. So silence and space were the most natural things in the world for me. I wasn't used to talking and being social. So that's what I grew up with. And it was only much, much later in life when words like spirituality and practice came into my focus that I began to realize how lucky I'd been, that all these things were part of me naturally and had been from the beginning.
I understand, John, you're also an organic farmer. So I was interested to hear from you. How did your experience as an organic farmer, along with your experience growing up, how did it influence your take in spiritual practices, if we can call it spiritual practices?
But Dennis, I'm not too keen on the word organic.
Hmm.
That's rather a newfangled description. I was brought up to be a good farmer, is what farming basically has always been before science came along and made it all complicated and artificial. In fact, when the when fertilizer and things were first introduced, I remember, when I to begin with they didn't exist hardly, and then they came in, mostly soon during and after the war, and of course they were called artificials by the farmers, and good farming is by and large natural. So I very soon learned the distinction between what's natural and what is artificial. And then this word organic was coined, which was in a way almost rather insulting to perhaps the majority of old-fashioned farmers who just thought of themselves as good farming. And by and large, organic farming is good farming. It's just natural farming. And so I'm not too keen on this new distinction, which tends to separate one sort of farming for another, whereas there isn't really a black and white division. There's a rather grey area, and many farmers sort of are in the middle, and it's so I don't like to call myself really so much an organic farmer as a good farmer. But I know why I'm called that. It's just what's the way sort of words have become used. But why was it important to me? Well, because it arises naturally out of man being close to the land. If man is close to the land, he loves the land, and he thinks about the land, and his mind is, how can I do the best for my land? How can I look after it? How can I serve it? This is how I was brought up. A good farmer leaves the land better than he found it. And you do it instinctively, dear. You look at a plant, and if you see it's uncomfortable, you try to just settle it so it's more comfortable. You love it. You look after it. Have animals, and you look after them. You make sure they're warm and comfortable and well fed. If they hurt themselves, you try to help them. There was a lovely phrase that was coined when I was in my middle of my farming years. TLC, tender, loving care, which is exactly what good farming is all about. You care for your soil. You're the husbandman of your soil. That was the old word for a farmer, a husbandman. You're married to your soil and you care for your soil. Like you might care for your wife, really. You husband your soil, Mother Earth. You look after her. You revere her.
John, would you say that that essence of looking after your land, looking after your farm, is that the same with spirituality? In a way, like you're looking after yourself, you're taking after yourself. Is that the same kind of philosophy?
Well, dear, what do we mean by spirituality? In a way, it's become a rather divisive word.
Hmm.
What is spirit? Where is spirit? Isn't spirit here now with us? What do I mean by spirit? Here is my body. You can see my old man's body sitting in front of you. Here's my mind functioning and coming out in the form of words. And I'm sitting in what one might call stillness or space, or perhaps even more acceptably silence. Here, I'm sitting in a room full of silence sometimes. My voice is sounding, as it were, in a box full of silence. And outside the window is the sky, so this silence extends into the sky, fills the valley. Indeed, this silence is everywhere. It's universal. So what is spirit? What are we talking about? Isn't this, we have silence, stillness, space, and the freedom that goes with it. And then what we might call presence, peace, spirit. Where does one end and the other begin? Or are they just a continuum from one to the other, just depending on the scale of one's realization? Isn't spirit as immediate and here and now as that? So just to be aware of this space I'm sitting in, or if I was out in the open fields, aware of the space, isn't that spirit naturally? You see, if we start to give putting labels on things, you tend to separate them, world and spirit. But actually, they're coexistent. They're together. You know, I may sort of jump the gun in this into a bit, but the phrase is, God is with us. It's not something separate from us. You can no more be separated from spirit than a fish can be separated from the sea. The fish is in the sea. I love the little story of the little fish that went to the big wise fish and said, "Where is the ocean?" This is rather like saying, "How do you find spirit?" It's natural, dear, to be aware of it, to be in it.
You have been interviewed. Let me correct that. You have been interviewed on Conscious TV, and it has gained a lot of attention. So,
Yes, yes, yes.
how did it change your approach to sharing your spiritual insights? Tell us about that interview.
Well, I never wanted it, dear. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about internet. Hardly knew it existed. I certainly didn't know anything about YouTube. Um, and but I practiced meditation since I was a young man. And a few people used to come and see me, and I'd help them as far as I could. And unbeknown to me, one of the people that I knew had seen Conscious TV and had written to them, and so out of the blue, the man that did it phoned me and asked me. But I wasn't too keen, of course. He wanted me to go to London. I didn't want to go to London, did I? Whatever for? So I said no. And he asked me again a bit while later, and I also refused. I didn't want to be. interviewed, and anyway, then a while later he came up here to where I live, and I hardly knew what was happening really. He interviewed me. I'd never been interviewed before, and I didn't know what YouTube was then, and at first I didn't know what he'd done with it. Anyway, somebody told me they'd seen me on internet, and apparently it had a good reception, and well, of course I was pleased to hear that, and then when he realised it had been well received, he said, "Shall we do some more?" So well, I didn't know what to say. Okay, if it's what you want, and so we did a few more. But so I'm a very unwilling public figure, dear. It's not my choice at all. I never wanted to be a well-known personality, because I've always believed that the work of prayer is best done behind the scenes. I've never sought for publicity. So I'm an unwilling public figure, really. But I've come to, I wouldn't say I dislike it. I was bewildered at first. I feel rather blessed to be in this position. And if I've helped anybody, well, thanks be to God. I don't feel that I've done very much, really. But
Tell, sorry, they mentioned something called autonomous sensory meridian response, the ASMR community. So, if you could share that to us.
well, of course, when I first heard that, I had absolutely no idea what that was all about. And the chap who makes these videos with me, he didn't either. Anyway, he
Mhm.
looked it up and came up with this long description. Made me laugh even more. I've never heard of such a funny thing. I'm a country boy. I'm not used to talking much, and most of the talking I did was to sheep and cows and nice quiet animals like that. So naturally, I talk quietly, and I don't really like talking much. I've always been a very quiet man. I suppose I've talked more than I've talked now than I've ever talked.
I understand, John, you've also done a lot of traveling aside from farming. Is
Yes,
that right?
yes,
Yeah. You've been
yes.
to Russia, Africa, and Peru. And I suppose with your travels, you've met a lot of people. And would you say, John, that it has kind of shaped your spiritual thinking, if you will?
The first great journey I went on, I wanted to be a cowboy when I was a young man, and we didn't know anyone in Texas, so Dad put me on a boat to go to Australia. So I had the best part of a year in Australia, in the outback of Australia. Um, and I remember so well that long sea voyage. People didn't fly in those days; you always went by ship, and it was a wonderful experience of a 6-week voyage. I'll never forget the wonder of the open sea, day after day after day, the great space, silence of the sea, and then the outback of Australia, the great open spaces there. And I think that early child of mine, that love for space and silence, developed enormously under those conditions. Um, I remember how difficult it was to come back to England again. And people would ask me how it had been. I didn't know what to say. How can you put it into words? And then various things happened. I started farming, and when I injured myself, I had to have a few years in business, but I couldn't bear it, so I broke away again, and went off to South America to make the world a better place. And wasn't very good at that. But on one occasion, I was sitting up on a mountainside, and I seemed to hear a voice from somewhere saying, "To make whole, be whole," which I didn't really understand at the time, of course, but I'd heard about meditation. And when I came back to England a year later, I looked forward, I found a school of meditation. And almost the first time in fact, it was the very first time I meditated. I'd had to come down to London by train to be taught to meditate. And I was in the waiting room of St Pancras Station waiting room, waiting to catch the late night train home among a lot of, homeless drunks and sort of people who spend the night in those places. And I meditated, and, all opened up like that. And I realized I no longer had to search for deserts and mountains to find the wide open spaces that I love, that was all within me. That was a great discovery, and that's been going on ever since. I've been in many desert places, been in the great prairies, been in the Russian steppes. I've been blessed. I've had many great experiences of the open sea and of the great open landscapes of this world, mountains, and they've all fed and strengthened and nurtured this love of the infinite that don't fence me in with life. And I suppose if anything sums up my life, it's that lovely old song, Don't Fence Me In. I think that's just it in a nutshell. That's what spirituality is all about. It's finding the don't fence me in. When life just gets too small.
John, would you kind of give some advice to people who are thinking, how should they start their meditation journey? What advice would you give to them?
When I went down to London to the School of Meditation, I remember I was interviewed. What do you really, really want in life? What's your deep heart's desire? And that's a very good place to start from. You may not be able to answer me straight away, but if all of you, there's people listening, just ask yourself this question: what do I really, really want in life? I wonder what will present itself to me. Well, if you're clear about that, then you'll probably know whether meditation is or isn't the way to go. Especially as I try to describe it is for myself, the don't fence me in of life, the finding the greatness, the love that never says no, the life that beyond death, beyond this mentality, beyond thinking, discursive mind. Because that's reality with a capital R.
I understand you've also written a number of books about these topics. So, which of your books would you recommend and why?
Well, you could say that my 10 books are really a love story from when I was a young man, from a child really, until as I am now. Because uh, the great sort of motive of my life has been to love and be loved. Yeah. In ever greater, to an ever more perfect degree. That's it. The perfect, ever seeking love's perfection. And of course, most of our worldly love experience, usually starts marvelous, and sometimes it continues that way, but it usually has a few ups and downs in it. And in the nature of things, even if it's only when death intervenes, well, it may outwardly anyway, before inwardly come to pass. But anyway, in my experience, this great um, adventure towards heaven, towards love's perfection, it has no end. And this is really what my 10 books are all about. But of course, on the way, it goes through, first of all, my great love of farming, the country, and my travels, the many experiences I've had of I think I wrote a very interesting book about my several years I lived in Russia. I learned an awful lot about life there. Oh my God, I did learn a lot of lessons about life. Life itself, the best and the worst of life. My God, what there is to learn. However much we know, we don't know the half of it. We don't know a tenth of it. We don't know 1% of it.
Now, Jen, this has been really an insightful conversation, but I just have three more questions left for you. Now, the questions are not more about philosophy or meditation, but it's more lighthearted. It's to learn more about you as a person. So, the first question is, what were you afraid of as a child?
Oh, I think I was afraid of other people, Dennis. Yes, I was sent to boarding school at the age of 7. It was a big shock for me. I was quite unused to that world.
And the
Um,
next one is, what is your favorite word in another language?
my favourite word in another language. Well, how do I answer that? I speak, or I have spoken 4 languages. Which one? My favourite word.
Do you have any like word in Russian that you know?
Many words. Do you know, one of the lovely things I learned when I was in Russia is how the Russians respect silence. In fact, many Russian saints say Tikhon, the silent one, the peaceful one.
I had a look at it, and I think the Russian word for silence is tishina. I don't know if I said it right. It's
Tishina,
tishina, tishina,
that's right. Yes.
tishina.
Yeah,
Okay.
good for you. Can you read Russian then?
No, I can't. I'm only limited to two language. I wish I had more time to learn um,
Yes,
some other language. Yeah.
Russia's a very interesting place. Very, very deep spiritual culture there.
Jan, do you have any other sort of um, dream when you were a child? Like you said you want to be a farmer, but if you hadn't been a farmer or if you hadn't been doing what you're doing, do you think you would have pursued something else in your life?
Uh, I think I was very young when
Hmm.
I wanted to go to the Himalayas and sit in the cave and be a hermit. Well,
Hmm.
why? No, I know. Then I read about Saint Anthony in the Egyptian desert, who had a lion who came to him with a thorn in his paw, and I would have loved to have been in a cave with a pet lion. That would have suited me just fine.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was quite a dream for me when I was a young boy.
Hmm.
I think I always had a sense of loving God
Hmm.
with a pet lion to help keep me company. Yes.
And John, do you have any final message to everyone?
Follow your heart, my dear. Follow what you love. You have to keep heart, my dears. Love something, even if it's only a geranium on the windowsill, a little dog or something. Looked on your website, Dennis. I thought, well, you're one of the heady ones. Well, I'm one of the hearty ones, dear. But we found something in common, haven't we? We've had a nice chat. So there's a big overlap.
Yeah, there's definitely an overlap with what what we're interested in, and I really, I'm really delighted to have spoken to you, and thank you for giving me your time. But thank you for sharing your perspectives, and it's lovely talking with you here on the VRH show. And I look forward to hearing more about your work, especially your YouTube channel. And I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to the next video that you will be uploading. So thank you very much, John.
Thank you, my dear. God bless you. Thank you for
You too.
good questions.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.